The Seattle Seahawks have many difficult decisions facing them this offseason. What to do about a poor offensive line that's been so bad for so very long? Who will be Tyler Lockett's replacement, as it does appear that the team is going to move on from him? Does John Schneider want to give DK Metcalf the monstrous contract extension it would appear that he would command? Can the team find common ground with Ernest Jones, the dynamic inside linebacker that they traded for at the trade deadline? And Mike McDonald's back there in the background saying, hey, John, I'd like a couple more supporting parts as well for my defense to help this thing better fly. But there's no more important decision that is hanging over the top of this team, the first decision they have to make in this upcoming offseason, than what to do about Geno Smith. Geno Smith. He took over for a legend 3 years ago at the quarterback position with no expectations amongst the fan base, but of course he has far surpassed that, playing wonderfully during this time period and helping to captain this offensive ship through some many troubled waters. He's had a real lack of pass protection over these past couple of years, probably some of the worst in football. The run blocking has not been much better. Under the old regime, you'd have a tendency at times from the defense to see it fully collapse and then force the offense to have to almost score every offensive possession. And then you have the two offensive coordinators who've been guiding this whole offensive show through that period, who, to put it kindly, weren't particularly good. And yet Geno has played marvelously over this period. There is no quarterback that you're going to find in this sport with more high-level throws over and over, week after week after week, where you see him making the impossible happen despite this lack of supporting cast. He's also done so on a very economical deal, as he is being paid about the 17th highest rate of any quarterback in the sport over the past 2 years, which you're probably getting about top 10 quarterback play for that, which is good bang for the buck. So it would look like on the surface of it that it's a no-brainer. You're going to re-sign him to a contract extension this offseason. And yet it gets a little bit tricky for John Schneider. The first thing that we got to address before whether or not it's going to be smart to put Geno Smith on a contract extension is what some people are hoping can happen here, which is to not make a decision. We'll play him out on the final year of his contract, and then we'll decide after this year. While that would be probably a great option for potentially the Seahawks, it's not going to be a great option for Geno Smith. And what hurts this possibility of happening is that there's a real scarcity on the open market of quarterbacks this offseason, especially if a guy like Sam Darnold stays with the Vikings. The Vikings don't want to give up a guy like McCarthy. Now suddenly you could see a guy like Geno Smith be a guy that a team would look to want to go trade for. Not great capital, but that they would trade for him, and here's the important part, then give him a contract extension, that which the Hawks might not be willing to do right now. And so this is where Geno's people can come back to Seattle and push very hard. I'm not talking about holding out here, but pushing this in a way to get this kind of deal done if the Hawks weren't to give him that extension, thus forcing the Hawks here to have to decide, we got to give you a deal or not. There is no option to sort of punt this down a season and deal with it next offseason. Given that this is the case, you also have to probably consider that Geno Smith's people are not going to give the Seahawks the same kind of discount that they got once before, that he's not going to be able to remain at that 17th highest paid rate, that he's probably going to want to be paid more to that top 10 rate, or like he's been playing for the past 3 years. When you paid him after he was coming off the Comeback Player of the Year award, it was 1 year of production, and that's part of what you could drive into the negotiations. You can't hear, especially if you have other teams out there that are willing to pay him up at that high water mark on the back of a trade. And so again, Seattle's hands going to be forced here into having to pay a little bit more than they did prior, and do they really want to do that? Another factor at play that's going to drive this deal one way or the other is Geno Smith's $44.5 million cap hit this upcoming year in the final year of his deal. Seattle's not going to want to stand on that number, especially as they're sitting right now with very, very little cap space and needing to clear cap space just to get their normal operations done, say nothing of actually improving the team. So this will probably move this to get something done, as I said, one way or the other, either trade or buy an extension, but you're going to have to get the deal done this offseason one way or the other. There are a few extra factors here too that don't make this deal easy. First, Geno's age. 34, going to be 35 next October. You don't feel good about paying a guy that amount of money, especially as we're seeing many of these quarterbacks in the sport take less of the approach of, let's say, Tom Brady or a Peyton Manning, and they more become like a Matt Ryan, where you just suddenly see these guys who are very good fall off a cliff really fast. And especially when it comes to injuries being a problem on top of that, where the injuries have mounted on some of these older quarterbacks through the years now, as we're seeing, not everybody is Tom, not everybody is Peyton Manning. And let's face it, with Geno over the past 2 years, he's had both of his seasons ended with him ailing, with him beaten up. It's understandable it's not all his fault because of the fact that he's been hammered so much by a bad offensive line, but it has been the reality of the situation. And again, part of why you got to go get this offensive line fixed if you're really looking to sign him to a contract extension. Another important question to ask in regards to the Geno Smith contract extension is whether or not the team is truly ready to contend. You're not going to go sign a 35-year-old quarterback if you're just trying to look for a bridge or you're just trying to tread water to get to the next quarterback. That doesn't make sense, especially when you consider that in signing this extension, you're going to have to pull from tomorrow. You're going to have to pull from your good cap situation in 26 and 27 to make this deal get done in 25. And I don't know if that's going to be a place that the team wants to go to here on this one if they determine that the team isn't ready to contend in 2025, that we might be on the right road, that we might be making progress, but not quite ready yet to get there. I don't think you're going to do this deal if you think it's 2026 that's truly the timeline to contend, and especially considering that they're just going to have to now onboard a new offensive coordinator, there may be more and more likelihood that that's kind of going to be the case, at least as far as their outlook is concerned. And that brings me to the next consideration. We don't know the type of offensive coordinator that Mike Macdonald is looking to bring in here. Maybe he tears a page out of the Harbaugh brothers playbook. These being two coaches that have had an offense heavily driven around the ground game, who've been willing to run a lot of the RPO kind of concepts. Maybe he goes to look to do that instead, which then wouldn't be necessarily a fit for Geno Smith. Or maybe he wants to go to more of a run-centric offense where you're going to limit down the number of passing attempts. Once again, then do you need to be paying a quarterback $45-50 million to execute that offense? Seahawks head coach Mike Macdonald was asked on a recent 710 interview what he thought about Geno Smith coming back next season.
You also mentioned Geno. Does that mean you expect Geno to be back next year as a quarterback?
I got no reason to say no. So I guess, yeah.
What are the next steps?
Not exactly committal, huh? A little bit like when you ask your buddy if he's still dating that girl and he goes, yeah. So I think that this is one that the Seahawks organization is turning over. If they were more certain of the fact he was going to be returning, I think you'd see more of Macdonald saying, no doubt about it, he's going to be our guy. He's here in the now and future. We've seen coaches take this kind of stand before where there might be a little bit of a question with the quarterback. And I'm torn myself on this one. It does come down to these many things that I've just laid out that you've got to make this determination based upon. This is going to be the biggest contract that you put on the books if you are going to sign it. It's also going to inform us whether this deal gets done or not, a lot about the direction the Seattle Seahawks are looking to take this upcoming offseason and about how much confidence they have inside the building that they truly can contend in 2025. It'll be interesting to see which way they go. I don't envy John as it's a very tough decision. My name is Brandon Kane. This is the Hawks Nest. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. But beyond all that, don't you ever forget, go Hawks.